Here is a story on how dandelions, yes, those little yellow flowers, how dandelions can show you how to be more resilient and then be more successful in your life and in the future. Welcome to this podcast. My name is Alain Faber. I've been teaching science for more than 25 years, and I'm doing this podcast sharing ideas that come to mind during the day from my students, from my colleagues, from society. And we're here to learn about how learners can be more successful, how teachers can be more successful, and how leaders as well, as part of either the school system, your community, or even at the head of a family. So let's see what we're going to discuss today. So today's topic is about dandelions. I was thinking about those flowers today because as I was driving in front of the school today, there were millions, well, there were thousands of them in the grass. And before we continue, we'll do a quick sound check. There we go. So as I was saying, there were thousands of those yellow flowers. And all I could think of is how amazing those flowers are and how often we underestimate what we can learn from them. So let's see if I can share with you a little story. Did you know that every spring we have dandelions that wake up and say, okay, the spring is here. Let's see if I can have my flower going. So here we have leaves opening up. We have photosynthesis happening. And then guess what? The flowers are popping up. Now, what is amazing with dandelions is that they've learned over their evolution that the deeper their roots are, the more chance they have to get water and the nutrients to be able to live. Funny enough, when I was young, most of the grass where we live were dandelions and weeds in the grass. And funny enough, even though we had dry summers once in a while, the grass was green and we had the greenest grass on the street. And the reason why, dandelions were often the reason. They had deep roots and they were able to survive dry spells in the weather. So there you go. So you have dandelions that have deep roots and therefore can survive a long time. And in the spring, they can go and get all the nutrients and water they need to get the flowers going. And they're efficient at what they do. Because if you have one dandelion and you don't take care of it, you have more the year after, and you get more the year after as well. Now, at my school, if you go around the mall, we don't use very much fertilizers, same as at home, and therefore there are more and more dandelions as we go along. Now, what is interesting though is that people, when they don't like them, they will start mowing dandelions and then cut the yellow flowers, and that's when dandelions become the most resilient plants that I know. So what happens is that when you cut the yellow flowers, so you just take your lawnmower and you cut all the yellow flowers, what happens is that we end up with a plant, the dandelion plant, that is living through a stress. It says, oh, I had planned to have a flower so that we can have pollination. What happened? Someone cut my flower. Now, pollination is important so that we can improve biodiversity so that the plant can survive. Now, if a dandelion loses its flower, what happens is that it goes on emergency mode and the plant has to decide about something. Either we can die because the flower did not get pollinized, therefore I cannot create seeds, or what if I was to take the flowers that are lower on the ground and then transform them right away into seeds? So you've noticed sometimes that someone will mow the lawn, cut all the yellow flowers of the dandelions, and about 4 or 5 days later, we end up with all these tall stems with all these nice little white puffs of all these seeds of dandelions. And guess what? If there's wind, we end up with seeds everywhere. So the question is, how can the dandelion can produce those seeds so fast? Well, the reason for that is that all these white seeds are clones of that same plant. So the dandelions have learned that if you can use pollination for reproduction, that's the best way, because then you can make sure that biodiversity is increased. However, If for one season, if for a few months, the pollination is not possible. So what happens is that the dandelions goes on the survival mode, transform their flower into creating seeds that are clones of themselves, and then seeds are flying away. And the reason why they do so is that the dandelion says, I have a possibility of not surviving or the possibility of producing clones of myself, so that in the next cycle, these new plants can do pollination and then assure biodiversity. So that's why I think that dandelions can show us so much about resilience, but also how to be more successful. So from this point, we know that we've talked about dandelions. We've learned that even though we are getting in their way of reproducing, they go their own way to clone themselves. So they found a way to bypass a hard situation in their lives. And this is how I'm going to take this story and I'm going to apply it to learning, teaching, and leadership. So when you are a student in a classroom, you are a trainee in a place where you're learning. What happens is that you are often hoping that you're going to ace everything. You're going to succeed in all evaluations. You're going to succeed in all labs, in all conversations, in learning a new language. The issue, though, is that you cannot expect to be 100% very good all the time. If that's the case, that means that you're in a situation where either the class is too easy or that this information comes to you very nicely. But if you do a lab or a test and you notice that it's not working out, there's a few things you can do. You could decide to, well, I didn't do well and therefore I'm not good. Or you could say, okay, I did not do well on an evaluation in an activity. So let's see if I can take this situation and say, okay, in this instant, I was not able to show how much more I know about the topic. So you did not grow as much as you thought you were. So what you can do, you could say, okay, if I didn't do it as well the first time, let's see if I can regroup and find a way to do something better. And in some ways, that's why when people have retests or they can redo presentations, it's like they are cloning their evaluation or activity into something new so that they have a new opportunity to show their success. But if you decide as a learner to not learn from your mistake, then what happens is that you are staying where you are and you're not evolving, you're not doing better in the situation. And I think that's how I think looking into dandelions is good. Sometimes you have a plan, the plan doesn't work, then you find a way to move on to the next bit saying, okay, what did I not learn at first? What can I learn now to be able to move forward? Knowing that in the next cycle, like in the dandelion, then you'll be able to show how much you know. Into teaching, what is interesting is that often we, like in the best days, I do lessons and they're interesting. Students are interacting. They are asking great questions. But every so often, I bring up a topic or I'm a bit tired or somehow it's not working because of the audience and my lessons are not good at all. Now, when I was young, as a young teacher, I remember when I was taking it very personally, saying that I was the reason why the lesson did not work. And then over the time, I learned that, yes, it is my fault. But on top of that, I have learned that through experience, we can notice when we see that, and you can pivot within a lesson to make it more interesting. And what I've learned through experience is when you're younger, you notice that things are not working the way you want. However, you are stuck in the fact that, well, what can I do to make it better? And therefore, sometimes you stay stuck and it's like a downward spiral. With experience, what happens is that when you're giving your lessons, you don't focus on yourself and how you do your lesson. You want to focus on your audience and see how they are interacting with what you do. So that means that if you're doing a lesson and you see it's not quite working, then you are pivoting to see if you can change the way you do things. You can ask questions. You can give them a chance to participate in different ways so that you are looking at your audience to make your lesson more interesting. Because an audience in a classroom for students or trainees, if you are doing some training for your company, what happens is that the audience has a chemistry sometimes, and it changes every day. Sometimes there's a day where they're a bit more tired. So there's a day where they know the topic and therefore they're not interested. Sometimes you are bringing topics that are just a little bit more advanced that they feel comfortable with, and therefore they just shut down completely. All of those are important to notice as you go along. When you start teaching, it might take you several hours after the class to realize what happened that went wrong. But the more experience you have, the more you are noticing that you do lessons for your students. And therefore, if you work with your students, with your audience, then you can pivot much more rapidly and therefore end up with a way to find positive ending for your lessons. Now, ever so often, if I get tired, there's some lessons that I cannot save. And interestingly enough, I tell my students, "Oh, this has been one of the most boring lessons. And if you're still following, I'm very proud of you." And then I give everybody a 5-minute break, we regroup, and then we go from there. The best thing is to be open with your audience in what's happening, especially as a teacher where you're creating lessons and activities daily, and you don't always have much time to put them together. So I do believe that the more experience you have, the better it gets, but not feeling that you are at the center of all of this. When you're teaching and you're giving lessons, you are guiding your audience for learning. And therefore, as a teacher, you are with your audience in the learning. And that's the best way to get everybody happy and involved. Now, my third part is about leadership and leading. So when I talk about leadership, it could be a parent in a family. It could be someone at the head of a religious group in your community. You may have a club for extracurricular activities, or you could be a CEO of a company. The whole idea here is how can you look at dandelions, as I mentioned earlier, to have resilience so that you can regroup and grow and do something more. Well, the best point I have about that is that a leader, the best way is you are there with people with you, your team, your group, and you're there to help them win. So as a leader, you're always looking for win-win situations. That means that you're there to guide them with the situations, with their solution, and helping them going through what's going on. Ever so often, some people need your help, need your idea. And often as a leader, it's just there for you to listen and then bring some ideas to guide them through their solution. Because as a leader, if you can guide people with you in their solution, what happens is that they will learn from that. They might fall down, but if you help them build resilience, then it will be easier for them. It's like the dandelion. Sometimes there's a stress and nothing's working out. You need to sit back, you need to regroup and say, okay, what did I do? What could I do better? And let's see if I can try something new. That's the best way. And having a vision, having an overarching idea of where the group needs to go, always help indeed. And I think these are the topics I have for you today. On this, I hope you had an excellent day. Today's story was about dandelions and how dandelions can show us how to be more resilient, and they found ways to regroup and be able to go to the next cycle to succeed. And on this, if you have a chance, go and see some other of my podcasts, and otherwise, have a great evening. I'm going to go for a walk. That's what I need right now, and I will see you next Wednesday at 7:30. Take care. Bye-bye.